Hi, guys. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm thrilled to be joined by my friend Carrie Waller, who I've known for way too long. And we're not even going to talk about that, Carrie, because I think that would age both of us. But Carrie is a watercolor artist. She's an Air Force spouse, and she's in the middle of a PCS. So we're really, really thrilled that you can make time for us today. Thank you so much, Carrie.
I'm thrilled to be here, and it's lovely to chat. Sue and I have been chatting for half an hour before we even start this, so it's
I
fun.
know. I'm like, oh, we could do this forever. We should really get the interview and then let's just chat afterwards. But Carrie, I mean, I have so much to chat with you about because I was telling you that we've been able to highlight so many military spouses in so many industries, but I was looking around, I'm like, we're missing the artists. There's so many military spouse artists. And so I called my favorite. And so I wonder if you could share your military spouse career journey with us, because I think a lot of spouses, whether they're starting out or whether they're just now starting to monetize their artwork, I think they'll find it really interesting because everybody always thinks that the pathway to your dreams is a straight line, and yours really wasn't.
No, not at all. In fact, our when I was in college and I was getting my degree in interior design, I met my husband, and he was an architecture student, and he was commissioning into the Air Force. And so when he commissioned, we ended up starting to date, getting married all within 3 months, and then
Wow.
finding out we were going to be moving overseas. So it was fast and furious and not a lot of time to think about what was happening. And I do remember clearly thinking it's kind of like that fork in the road. I had a job lined up, and I was at an architecture firm in Chicago, and I had figured out my like 5 year plan, and I'm one of those people that like had this 5 year plan. And then Brian came around, and it totally, that's life, right? And
Yeah.
spun me around, and then he found out he was moving to Germany. And so I was like, oh, so I had to rethink everything. So I moved overseas right off the bat with a brand new degree and no idea about the military and zero idea about GS positions or any of that. And so I moved into this world really having no clue. And we got to Germany, and they had at that time interior design positions in the Air Force. And
Mm.
they had an open position that had been sitting there forever, but I had no idea like what it was, a GS-12, I think, and I had no idea what that meant. And here I am coming fresh out of college, and they want to hire me, but they would have to bust it down to a lower GS level. And that's like unheard of. So I spent a year going back and forth and back and forth. And at the end, they're like, well, you can volunteer. And I just didn't, that was not what my plan was. Like I said, I had this 5 year plan, and volunteering was not listed on that. So I quickly learned that I was going to have to figure out my own path. And this is a theme that has happened everywhere I go because we've lived overseas for almost half of my husband's career. And so every place we went, I realized I'm going to have to hit the ground running and reinvent myself every time. And so at that time when that happened, I told myself, okay, if I'm following Brian around, I will always do something creative. That was my deal with myself. I wasn't just going to take any job. And so I forged my own path in Germany, and that's how I met Sue. I started teaching classes everywhere I could teach arts, skills development, arts and crafts, whatever they call it now. They hired me. They had an oil painter, and they needed a drawing instructor, and they needed some other kind of painting instructor. So I went to the library, grabbed all the books on watercolor. I went home, painted 3 watercolors, took them back to him, and he's like, "Okay, you can teach watercolor." I had never painted in
Oh my
watercolor before.
gosh.
So so I went back, and so I started teaching watercolor classes through there. I started doing kids classes through the after school programs. And then from that I started getting small groups. Like that's how you and I had classes off base at different people's houses. And then I went to work as a contractor for the Army, and I did the Boys and Girls Club of America art program, and I also did murals for them for almost a year, painting their kids centers, youth centers. And so I just really, I was like, okay, I was making it happen. I had like all these different avenues, but they were all creative, and I was generating income. And so all of my money went to traveling because that's what we were, Brian's paid the bills. We did all the traveling and fun stuff with ours. We were newly married, no kids, so we went out and traveled with all mine. So then after we moved from there, we moved to Charleston, South Carolina. Same deal I made with myself. I will do something creative. Since I had done the murals, I felt like that was like kind of dipping my toes in both worlds, still a little bit interior design, but also creative and artistic. So I actually found there was a lady that had put an ad in the paper looking for someone to partner to do murals in Charleston. So her and I started doing faux finishes and murals all over all those great beach houses in Charleston where we painted elevators, we painted every spot you could think of in these beach homes in Charleston. And my mom ended up moving there and opening a frame shop, and I worked there for a while. So I just you see this path. I kind of always was doing something creative. I did stop for a minute. We had children and starting in Charleston. We moved to Ohio. I had my second son there. And then when we moved to Alabama after that, I was sitting there with two kids, toddler and a baby, and Brian deploys to Afghanistan. It was his second big deployment. And so when he deployed to Afghanistan, I was kind of homebound, which had not happened before because I had these two kids that were little and it was not as easy to get out. And I thought, I'm gonna go crazy if I don't figure out something to do. And I was like, well, I used to paint like way back when I would paint. And so I started a vlog or a blog at that time because that blogging was a big deal. And so I started a blog and I started painting a week. And I did that to keep my sanity with little ones and a husband in a really dangerous location. And through that blog, I met Leslie Seda, who had started a podcast and she was doing art marketing. And I followed exactly what she said. She'd been in marketing for 30 years, and then she herself decided to become an artist. Did exactly what she was saying and became the biggest fan girl of her podcast. I went on to co-host with her. And yeah, so I then found out that there's a whole world that I didn't know, that you could be a professional artist, you could teach workshops, you could, all these different societies that are all over where you can exhibit. And so that became new to me and I didn't know that it existed. And so then I shifted gears and decided that's what I was going to put myself, like all my thoughts on. So I started at that time. So that was when my son Sam, who just turned 16, he was a baby. So that was when Sam turned was a baby. So yeah, so I started painting every week and then entering contests. And the thing that I had for me that is different than some artists, a lot of times most of the people I know have lived in the same area their entire lives, and they will enter a society that is local to them, and they kind of get in this rut where they don't go outside of their parameters. And being military, we live all over the place, and so
Right.
I never gave myself those parameters. I said, okay, I want to enter strategically from coast to coast so I can kind of feel out where my art does well and what's going on. And as I would enter these societies, most states have a society, and then there's some larger ones in watercolor, like the National Watercolor Society, American Watercolor Society, Transparent Watercolor Society of America. They're kind of the three big ones. And then you have each state, most states have some kind of art watercolor society. So I started entering strategically around the country to kind of get my name out there and see how, and as my paintings were winning some awards, I was getting a little notoriety, and I was asked to come and teach at some of these places. And then I got publications out of it, just from winning shows and having my art out there. So my very first one was actually in a French art magazine. I still don't know to this day how they came across me, but they did.
Very cool.
And so yeah, so that's kind of how I've gotten where I am today. And so now I'm teaching all over the world, exhibiting all over the world. And that's where I am now. And I did along the way, through that podcast, Leslie had suggested everybody have a mentoring group. And so I did form a mentoring group with three ladies. I started out five, and we are now at three. But we started a mentoring group and we started exhibiting and traveling. Our very first time we all met in person and not online was in Italy. So
Nice.
yeah, so it was a lot of fun. And Maria is another fellow military spouse. And so anyway, we have now been exhibiting for over a decade and traveling together all over the world. So
No, I love that. I have so many questions for you. So, I want to, I wonder if I should start with my second question because, you mentioned Maria, and like we had the opportunity to work on that military spouse art exhibit many years ago, and I was amazed at the number of military affiliate artists out there. I mean, can you speak a little more about that network for military spouse artists and how people find you?
Yeah, I was amazed too because we kind of did this call and I knew a handful of people that, I could reach out to. But you're surprised when you redo a call and a prospectus. And luckily I had my feet in the art world a little bit, so I was able to kind of send it out and get it in the right people's hands. And we got a good, nice response. I think that that's been my challenge my whole time that Brian's been in the military is trying to explain to people what I do because it's different than a traditional job. And it's my own internal struggle of like validating myself and explaining what my career is because it is unconventional. And for the longest time, I felt like those two worlds just didn't make sense. The military world is fairly black and white and rules and this and that, and art is a little more, stereotypically, a little more out there. And so for a long time it was hard for me to have my elevator speech where I could condense it down to a few words and make people understand what I was doing. And now I don't feel that way as much because I've done a lot of things and I can kind of more concisely put it together. And so, but that show made me realize how many more spouses were out there that are in the same boat. And I think we all felt that way because, when you're an artist, you're isolated, you're working at home in your studio most of the time, or people do paint out, plein air, but for the most part, you're your own business. And so you don't realize how many are out there. And it's so full circle right now that we're in our probably last assignment. And my husband's boss, his wife is another watercolor artist named Carrie. One of the chief's wives is an artist and she's doing I mean, we're all like doing this thing, and it's really interesting how many artists are surrounding me. I don't know if they're it just the way it is right now, and this is my world, but it's pretty crazy that it's now become kind of this pretty normal thing with this group that I'm in with now. So I feel very full circle with these people. But yeah, I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, no, I think it's so cool though. And I know, I think people will see the painting behind you. And yes, that is one of Carrie's paintings. And I mean, I remember taking a watercolor class from you, and I guess I was taking one from you very early on. I did not realize that. I thought you'd been teaching forever. I mean, you're a great teacher, but you have come a long way in terms of your style. Like I guess once you decide you were going to pivot right into art full time, you really hit the ground running and start entering these competitions. Did not realize this way back then. But like for people who are just now starting out, like how do they know where those competitions are? How do they know which ones are right for them? And where do they find these magical lists of competitions they should be entering to build their brand?
Right. So I do think it's good to start where you are and find your art society that you are there. That kind of groups you in with your people. So you can find your community where you are. And so once you figure out what is in your community, and maybe it's not where you are, maybe it's an online community. We have this ability now with Zoom and everything. It's opened up everything. So you can form your own community as well. So you don't have to limit yourself, but find some people that are your people. And what I did was artists that I really loved, I kind of went on their websites and I looked at the show. A lot of people have their awards and their resumes kind of laid out on their website. So I would go to an artist that I really loved or a similar style or, still life painter, and I would see where they were entering. And then to me, that was okay, these are the shows that I'm going to try to gear myself towards. I'm in Arkansas right now, Little Rock, and we have Mid-Southern watercolorists
Hmm.
right here. Georgia, Alabama. I mean, almost every state has some kind of art society or watercolor society. And it's just figuring out which ones are worth entering and which ones aren't. And by that, it's expensive to ship paintings if you're entering a physical show. So I want to make sure that the prize money is, decent so that if you do win a prize, that you can get some of that cost back. Some shows may sell better than others, and some of this is trial by error, and talking to that community that you need to try to figure out your community. And that has helped a ton too with my mentoring group. There were two other watercolorists originally in the group with us, and we literally, especially during COVID, we're getting together every week and we would sit there and say, okay, what exhibits are coming up? What shows are coming up? What, are you entering this one? And we would talk about our experiences and, what they thought was good to enter. Art magazines have contests. There's several that are online. Online is good because there's no shipping involved. And all of them have a prospectus and they tell you exactly what you can and can't enter. A lot of paintings have to be paintings that you've done in the last couple of years. Can't have been another national show. So you really have to read every prospectus from each place. But and there's places online, call for entry, cafe, call for entry, and they'll have a listing of art shows. Um, there's Submit or something like that. I'm trying to think of all the different places. There's several online. So if you do a Google search, you can, look up different things. But I would try to find someone in your area that's a little ahead of where you are and reach out. And even if you can't find them, go to their website and see what they've been entering, what awards they have, and try that first.
How did you get past the imposter syndrome, which I'm assuming you have because all of us have it, um, of like, yeah, I'm going to enter into this competition. How'd you get past that initial, um, hesitation or anxiety that, is my artwork actually good enough to enter? Like, how did you, jump that hurdle?
Well, there's a couple things I'll talk about that. The very first workshop I ever took, which I found in the back of Artist Magazine, they had an ad and I had little kids and it needed to be geographically where I had babysitters. So the first one I found was in Louisiana, New Orleans area, and my in-laws were in that area. And I was like, okay, great. They can babysit for me and I can go take this watercolor workshop. And that was the first one I ever took. And I went there, and in that workshop was a whole group from the Louisiana Watercolor Society. And they were thrilled to have me there because a lot of these societies, a lot of people wait until they're retired, right, to do some
Mhm.
of what they've always wanted to do. So a lot of these societies are a little bit of a retired crew. So to have someone in their 20s, or 30s, they were like, oh, fresh blood. So they were
Mentoring.
happy. They were happy to have me, become part of their society. And like I said, I had no idea that these existed. And so they were really encouraging of entering into their show. And most societies will have what they call like a member show, which is like a smaller exhibit that's easier to get into, and then an international show, which is harder to get into. And in the international shows, normally if you get so many times, so many years, like 3 years, a lot of times, if you can get into three different ones, you earn your signature status. So I have multiple signature status. So I can sign my name, Carrie Waller, AWS, American Watercolor Society, because I've earned my signature status. And I have all these letters I can sign my name with, kind of like any other business where you have an accreditation or whatever. And so they were very encouraging, and I entered their member show the first time. And through that, and finding your style is another whole thing. Like, how do I know what I want to paint? And I followed that art podcast that I mentioned earlier, and she had suggested that we paint for a calendar so that you could give it as a gift or sell a calendar. And so that was really great, pivotal, because it made me think about 12 paintings that were all related to each other and how they could look. It's almost like a mini show, right? Even though you're just putting it in a calendar. And so it made me think about a theme and putting it together and what 12 paintings. And so that turned me on to still life. I didn't even know I wanted to paint still life, but because of that idea, I painted still life because I could control it. And then I took that workshop and I continued with the still life idea, and I entered one of my first still life paintings I ever did into their member show that year, and it won first place. And that was, I don't say that to brag. It was so validating. So all of a sudden I was like, I am where I'm supposed to be right now. And it was, every little time I get down, I think we all do this. You have this roller coaster, right? Because
Yeah.
life. And every time I get down and I'm like, that's it. I don't know if I want to do this anymore. Some little validation happens and you're like, okay, you're on the right path. Keep going, keep going, keep going. And so that was a huge validation right at the beginning to keep going. That doesn't happen for everybody, I'm aware, but it put yourself out there is what I'm trying to say. You never know. And so because that happened, I was like, okay, I need to maybe I'll shoot for the international shows and then I'm going to shoot for the big shows. And I wasn't hesitant to start pretty early on to see what stuck. So, does it get in? And like some of these societies, the three big tier ones, some people enter for 30, 40 years and never get in. And so you have to kind of like just go for it and see what works. And then I stumbled on I have light bulbs behind me. I painted light bulbs in 2014 was the first time I painted those. And that has become kind of my signature series. And that has probably gotten me the most notoriety, articles, signature statuses. So I will continue to paint light bulbs probably the rest of my life. But I also have other series that I paint. Um,
I like your Japanese series with the teacups.
Yes, and that's been another very successful, and that's where we have this great, amazing life with as military spouses. And I try so hard. I've met so many people when they are in their location, they're so sad that they're there. And even in Japan, when I was there, there were so many people that just couldn't wait to get out of Japan. They didn't want to be in Japan. You have got to just embrace it and figure out something that's great. Tokyo is not that hard for me to embrace and find something great, but maybe some of these little tiny ones, places we've been, didn't sound so great. But I was like, I'm going to make the best of it and try to figure out, what I can do in this location, and something will happen here. So you have to go in with a positive mindset. You're here anyway, so are you going to make it happy or are you going to make it a depressing situation? So all back to find your community, find your niche, and just get, on the ground running as soon as you get there. Figure out what you want to do. And that's kind of been my motto everywhere we've gone. And the good thing is it's rubbed off on my kids who my son's graduating. He did 3 high schools, you know, and then my other son's done 3 schools as well, but it hasn't been all of his high school career. So having that mindset will trickle down to your kids as well if you have children, and it just makes everything a little bit better if everyone just goes in and says, you have the best opportunity ever. We moved somewhere for 11 months and it was a border town in Texas. And I didn't even want to say the word when I found out we were going there. I didn't want to say the name of the town. And we got there and we loved it. It was one of the best assignments we've had. And so we got there and I was like, look, guys, we're going to be here 11 months. You can be whoever you want to be. You get to have a social experiment and you can be whatever and you don't have to be scared. You don't have to be whatever. You're moving. You're leaving in 11 months. So they took that to heart and ran with it, and it made that assignment like amazing. And so I try to do that for myself too. Like, hey, be who you want to be in this assignment.
So, one of my most treasured possessions I have, Carrie, is a painting that I commissioned you to do for me when I started NMSN. And it was really a fun process because, you talked to me and you're like, well, what do you want to convey in this painting? Like, what are the things that are important to you? And so we got my book in there, we got NMSN in there, and it's all there. And so I love it. I just look at it and I mean, it's like a painting of my career. But it's so amazing because when we first met, we were taking watercolor classes together, and now you're this artist that is so established that you're now doing personal commissions. You're teaching classes, you have workshops, you're mentoring, you are a brand ambassador. For someone who's just starting out or somebody who may be stuck in their creative career, how do you start to expand and scale? How do you determine rates? How do you determine pricing? Like, where do you even get started on monetizing?
So I think that all comes back to finding that community again. Um, if I didn't have a group of artists that I could bounce ideas off of and say, hey, how much are you charging for this? And it's so important. I'm now in a group, like another group of pretty established watercolor artists. I still have to pinch myself that I'm included with these people, but we get together and talk about just that because we also in this industry, you're isolated and you don't want to be the one with the cheapest rates, when these organizations are hiring you to teach workshops. So that doesn't do well for anyone in our profession. So we want to find out like, oh, how is this place to work for? How, this organization, were they good to work with? How much are you charging? We kind of go back and forth. And then with my own mentoring group, I was talking about this group of ladies that I have, same kind of idea. Like, what are you hearing? One of my friends, she passed away, one of the ones that was in my group, but she was president of one of the art societies. And so she had a lot of inside information about what they were, other artists were charging for workshops. same thing. I don't hesitate, and I haven't from the beginning, back to when my blogging days, reaching out to people, reaching out to artists. In fact, Carol Carter is a hero of mine in the art world, watercolor. When I first started, I just did a Google search, women in watercolor, and she popped up, and I emailed her, and she's a friend to this day. She's amazing. And I would ask her when that first publication came in, asking me if I wanted to be in a French art magazine. I had never heard of this magazine. I'm like, is this a scam? So I emailed Carol. I'm like, have you heard of this? And she's like, oh yeah, I was in there last year. It's legit. So it's so important to reach out, even if you don't know them. Um, Find somebody. You may get somebody that doesn't want to talk to you. Go to the next person. You just have to find those people, and then eventually you start to figure it out. But so I did the same thing with commissions and art. If you're in art shows, there'll be a list of prices sometimes on those websites, and you can kind of see, okay, my art maybe is similar to this person's art. What are they charging? Let me, and I kind of would go off of that. I've gone back and forth. I've done everything from formulating price per square inch to just kind of randomly throwing throwing numbers out there. And the thing I can say is don't undervalue yourself, because especially in art, I myself was tricked into, I was at a show here in Arkansas, and there was this little, almost like 8 by 10 painting. This is very pretty painting. And that painting had a very large price tag. And I myself, who is in this world and paint, went up and thought, oh, they know what they're doing. And I was like, wait a minute, they put that price on there themselves, but
Randomly.
I fell for it in my head. So if you undervalue your art, people are going to think you're not as professional or as important as this other person who, even though they chose that price tag, it just has this. So that was a big eye opener for me when I did that to myself. I was like, wait a minute. So don't undervalue yourself. Try to find a community that can help you gauge where you are. When I was doing the art marketing podcast, one of the hosts on there, she suggested when you don't know where your art falls in, she was like, literally put it next to, she said she would take art from magazines and figure out what she gravitated towards when she was looking through art magazines, and then when she would put her art up next to the little pictures, like literally
Yeah.
stacking, and see like where does the am I in the right place, am I not as good, or do I need to be better, do I need to do? And if you can't do it yourself, because it's so hard sometimes when you're very close to your art, have a group of people that can help you critique yourself. And you've got to have a thick skin, and you've got to be real, and you have to say, okay, where do I fall? Do you, and get kind of a consensus from people that you,
Outsourcing.
yes, and that you trust, and they have a professional idea. And you can reach out to, like I said, other artists. There are a lot of people. I do mentoring sessions with people. There are other artists that do mentoring sessions. That's a great way. My husband, not the best person to ask for advice in this. I love him to death, but you have to figure out your people. So that you can trust, that can help you with those kind of things. And a lot of societies, I think Florida, I was teaching in Florida, when your Florida Watercolor Society, they had critiques where you could pay like $5 or $10, and the judge of that show would, go over it and tell you, why it got in, or why it did, what they didn't like about it. Those are all valuable. It's also one person's opinion. I will put the caveat on that. I now am in a position where I'm judging a lot of shows, and you realize how subjective it is. So you really have to you put your business cap on instead of your emotional cap on when you're doing critiques and the business side of it, and just take all of it with it's easier to say than it is to do, but you really have to realize this is Carrie Waller's opinion. Sue Hoppen has a different opinion. If you and I both talk about the same painting, we're going to have two different opinions, and you have to realize that and take it that way. Because I've met people that have let that shut them down, like their whole career or their whole whatever. You can't be that sensitive about it. You've got to say, okay, I will take something constructive out of this, and I'll move to the next person and get their opinion. And like I said, find your people that are your cheerleaders, but also are being real with you, and go from there. But with pricing, with everything. And then also you kind of know if you're entering shows and it's just not happening and you're not getting into anything, then that's probably you need to move to a different subject, or you need to amp up your art, maybe take some classes, do something to figure out how you can get into shows. I have a painting right now that I've entered in 3 or 4 different shows and has not been in any of them. So I know that that painting is not resonating with multiple different people. So probably ditching that series and moving on to something else.
Okay, this is why you're a really good mentor. I can see why you're a very effective mentor and have so many proteges because you're very, very creative. Like I know your art. Like I followed you. So I know your artwork. And it's like it's very creative, it's very beautiful, but you're also very business minded. Like you are just like steel trap. I'm not going to get emotional about this. Just because we're creatives doesn't mean we can't be smart, real business people. And so I love that, like that separation. So if people want to find you, if they're looking for a mentor, how do they find you? How do they connect to you?
So my website is Carrie Waller, Carrie Waller Fine Art.com. You can find me and email me that way. My email is carriewallerart@gmail.com. And I'm also on Instagram at Carrie Waller Art. So you can reach out, and I'm on Facebook as well, but you can reach out, easiest probably to email or through my website, to check that out.
And we can
I
check out
do
your paintings on Instagram.
Instagram and my website. Yep, all my paintings are there.
Yeah, you guys need to go see that Japanese series. It's amazing. We could talk forever, but I promised Carrie I would not keep her longer than an hour. So we'll just end it here for you guys. But if you want to catch up with her, go check her out on Instagram, go connect with her. And if you have questions or if Carrie thinks of resources, I'm sure that she will post them in the comments. Or if you put them in the questions, I will make sure those questions get to Carrie. But at this point, I just want to thank USAA for making these conversations possible. I am having the best time interviewing all these amazing military spouses doing just incredible work in their fields. So if you have a story to tell, I hope that you will also apply for your own highlight. But thank you so much, Carrie. This has been such a pleasure catching up with you.
Thank you, Sue. And you you are one of those names in the back of my head when I see what you're doing and when I get discouraged that I'm like, what would Sue do? I literally kid you not. I'm not trying to just
Oh,
kiss
that's
up.
hilarious.
My entire career, this has been, you've been in the back of my mind, like, Sue is doing this, I can do this. Sue is doing this, I can do this.
I love that because that's validating because some days you wake up and you're like, I'm not relevant and I nobody notices. So I thank you so much for that. But okay, hopefully we'll see you guys next week. We're gonna let you go so Carrie and I can continue chatting. Bye, guys.